In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you.
And we are back on, I don't know, Taylor, Wednesday, Thursday. I think it's going to be Wednesday. But we are back and recording to discuss my topic for. Oh wait, I'm doing the fail. Sorry, this is doing the fail. Farz joined here by Taylor. We record these back to back. Release them on different days, and I forget sometimes when I do my intro in which podcast episode.
I just when you took a break for 2 seconds, I went on Instagram and here's a picture of Murder She Wrote, and it says she could find Kate Middleton. Angela Lansbury of Murder She Wrote. This is what I'm talking about. This is how fun this is. Also, happy St. Patrick's Day. We didn't say that yet to each other.
Oh yeah, happy St.
I know it'll
Patrick's Day.
pass by them. We're going to a bar. My daughter's friend's dad is in a band, and it's like going to be a cute like dad band, and we're going to go watch them play. So it's going to be sweet. I think that the kids are
That's
going to like
fun.
it. Yeah.
Get yourself a Guinness or several Guinnesses and have a good time.
I'm going to have so many Guinnesses. Oh God, I also have other bad news about me if you want to hear it.
Let's hear it.
I officially have prediabetes, so I have to like talk to my doctor and start eating no carbs again and potentially getting on insulin, and I'm bummed.
Well, it's pre-diabetes, so you don't have to do insulin yet, right?
Not yet, but like I could to like try to like get it under control. I have to talk to the doctor still, but it's just like because I had diabetes when I was pregnant, so it was like kind of bound to happen, you know? So I've just been
Aren't all those weight loss drugs, weren't they designed for diabetes?
yes. So I'm also wondering if I should just take Ozempic and weigh 120 pounds again. Ooh. But I don't think I should do that.
I mean, if it controls your diabetes and prevents you from being diabetic, then yeah, for sure you should do that.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. We'll see what they say. But yeah, it's been a rough week.
Man, getting older is great, isn't it?
Fucking sucks.
Fucking
Yes.
sucks.
Yeah.
But anywho, I'm gonna get into my topic. Should we do a guessing game?
Yeah, so
It is based on a geographic formation that was created through the process which you have covered
an island.
and has killed hundreds of people.
An island with a monster on it. A tsunami. Is it a tsunami?
It's an island with a monster on it. You got it. No, I am going to be covering Mount Everest.
Oh, fun.
But I'm gonna cover it in like an interesting way because I think Mount Everest has been done to death and it's like kind of boring to talk about at this point. But I'm gonna cover it in 3 parts. Okay, so
Okay.
what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cover the history of climbing Everest. I'm going to cover what it is like to climb Everest today, and I'm gonna discuss what y'all are really here for, which is kind of the disaster stories around climbing Everest. That's it.
Cool.
That's kind of how I'm gonna wrap this up.
I'm
So
excited.
let's get into the history of Everest itself. So obviously, we all know Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. It sits at just over 29,000 feet, which is somewhere around 5.5 miles above sea level.
Mhm.
One fun fact I discovered, which is good to know, is it's actually not the tallest mountain if you measure it from its base. So the tallest mountain in the world, measured from its base, you were kind of close to. It's actually in Hawaii. It's called Mauna Kea, and it's 30,600 feet. So about like 1,600 feet taller than Mount Everest. But that's if you measure it from the base, and the base is 17,000 feet underwater. So,
Oh, sure. Well, isn't the base of everything underwater?
I mean, if you go that far into the logic of it, then yes. Then technically, if you measure Mount Everest from where the Mariana Trench is, then it is very tall.
What about that part of the earth that's hollow, where the monsters live?
Where all the monsters are,
I don't
yeah.
know.
So for context, that height, 29,000 feet for Everest, that's only 6,000 feet short of how high a Boeing 737 flies.
I was gonna
It's
ask.
pretty
Yeah.
tall.
Yeah.
It runs through the border between Nepal and Tibet/China. Kind of depends on how you feel about Tibetan autonomy. But that's kind of geographically where it's located. Locally, it's been named. So basically, it didn't really have a agreed upon naming convention in the local communities that surround it. And it wasn't until 1865 that we actually started calling it Mount Everest. The reason we called it Mount Everest was that the Brits had this chief surveyor who was responsible for kind of surveying the entire globe. And then the new chief surveyor decided to name this mountain after the former chief surveyor, and that guy's name was Sir George Everest, so they called it Mount Everest. That's what we call it,
Wow,
Mount Everest.
that is dumb. I didn't know that.
To his credit, so George Everest was actually alive when this happened. He died like 5 years after this. To his credit, he actually was like, "No, don't name this thing after me." First off, it doesn't translate into anything meaningful to the local communities, and also
Right.
in the local Hindi language that the Nepalese speak, you can't really say it that easy. And so he was like, "Just call it something different." But they're like, "We're just gonna go with Mount Everest." So
Oh, well, good
there
for
you
him
go.
for like acknowledging that.
Yeah, yeah. So climbing Everest was a fascination since its discovery. Obviously, in many ways, doing so was essentially a suicide mission. For anyone who's been to Denver, as an example, Denver's 1 mile above sea level. So is
Hmm.
Mexico City, by the way. But when you're
Oh,
in
really?
Denver, yeah, when you're in Denver, you have 83% of the breathable air you would find at sea level. So you have a 17% diminished oxygen concentration at 1 mile up,
Hmm.
for
Um,
context.
I have a stupid joke that I saw on the internet because then I just thought through that and I was like, well, yeah, Mexico like doesn't use miles, so like why would they even say that? But there was a joke that I heard where some guy said, "My wife, she just left me for being un-American. I saw it coming from a kilometer away."
That is a good one.
Yeah.
I might reuse that one. Um, so Denver, 83% breathable air. Everest, obviously a lot higher. You get 33% of the air you get at sea level. So that causes a lot of
Wow.
problems. Obviously, not being able to breathe is a really tough issue, but it also
Yeah.
causes hypoxia, oxygen starvation of the brain. It causes edemas in the lungs. There's like so many ways you can die on Everest that's just one of them.
Oh my God.
The other fun one is I didn't know this, but apparently, if you go high enough into the air, you hit what's called a jet stream, which I think I've heard
Hmm.
through meteorology reports before.
We
Apparently,
talked
the
about the jet. I'm sorry. We talked about it with the volcanoes as well, because part of the problem is when the volcanic ash hits the jet stream, that's when it goes over the whole world,
goes
and
everywhere.
it's like everywhere. Yeah.
So they've recorded winds in the jet stream on the peak of Everest at 175 miles per hour.
Jesus Christ.
And then after that, the weather up there is somewhere around negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Like it's bad. It is really bad
I hate it. I hate
to
everything
be
about
on
it. Those
Everest.
are all things I hate.
Yeah, yeah. So regardless of that, people keep trying to climb it. So let's get into the first documented version of this. That happened in 1953. So this was done by a New Zealander named Sir Edmund Hilary and a Nepalese Sherpa named Tenzing Norgay. It was around 11:30 a.m. that they summited Mount Everest. I think it's very romantic to think like these two guys just like were hanging out in a tent together and do this. That's not how this works. Like this is like teams of people that come together to kind of help make this happen.
I have a dumb question.
Sure.
I don't even know if I want to ask it. Like, I guess how do you know that you're at the top? Like, aren't there like is it just like so super clear that it's at the top? Because I feel like when I climb mountains here sometimes, like obviously like they're not that tall, but we like hike up a mountain and you're like, oh, there's one taller right there, or like whatever. Like I guess do they go on like a prescribed path?
So they created the path that is now the prescribed path. There's a north and
Got it.
south face, and that's why we have North Face as a brand now. But that's the most popular path.
Oh, that's fun.
But I'm trying to remember the exact name of this thing, but it was called the British did a thing called the Great uh Chief Survey or Great Survey. I forgot what it was exactly, but basically there was this massive project that the British the Britain took on to essentially survey all the major geographical territories under the kingdom. And
Hmm.
not actually, yeah, it was kind of under the kingdom because it was partially India as well. And they basically were able to, from a distance, figure out how tall Mount Everest was. That essentially, like where the peak was, and how that peak was the tallest place on Earth. And so that happened many years earlier. It was like 1850s or something that we actually learned that it was the tallest spot on Earth. But that's how they knew this is the peak. They're like We did the measurements. That's the tallest spot. Go to that spot, basically.
Hmm.
So, so yes, they were the first ones to technically step on the mountain face. I will say, like at first, I had like these weird colonial thoughts about Edmund Hillary, and then the more you learn about him, the more you're like, this guy was kind of an awesome dude. Like he
I
was,
know it's so interesting because like it gave him the opportunity to do what he was wanted to do, right?
yeah,
Wait, what year are we in again?
1953.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a
Well, I was
crazy.
in. How long did it? How long it was?
I thought it was like 1850.
Yeah, no, but but there is some theories that it was actually summited 29 years earlier. So, oh, I forgot to mention this, but apparently the date that this happened was like a few days before Queen Elizabeth was going to go through her coronation and become queen, and this news got to her like right before she was about to go through her coronation. So that the first thing he did at her coronation was announce that the UK has summited Mount Everest. So it was like
It's
a
fucking
big
cool.
hoopla.
That's
But
cool.
there is a theory that 29 years earlier in 1924, the peak had actually been summited, but just not documented. So that year, there was a team that included two guys named George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, and the team attempted to summit twice before a third attempt was made. Those two times it failed because in one situation, one of the climbers, the lining of his throat peeled off because of the cold, and he was choking on his own throat. Shoot.
I hate that. That's the worst thing I've ever heard.
And the other one went completely blind for 3 days from snow blindness. So that's why those two failed. But Mallory and Irvine decided to attempt a third attempt on this expedition. And on this attempt, they were somewhere in the 26,000 foot range, which is called the death zone. And that's when the weather picked up. They decided to camp overnight before trying it again in the morning, and they never made it back. So we don't know what actually happened. But what we do know is that in 1999, so what is that, 75 years after they die, George Mallory's body was found at 26,700 feet. And it's weird. His body, he had a puncture wound in his skull. His right foot was completely shattered and his leg was broke. What they assume
Yeah.
happened was he was trying to come back down. And so he was doing a controlled slide down the side of the mountain with his ice pick behind him, kind of serving as like a break essentially from him going all the way
Hmm.
down too quick. And what they think happened was that he probably skipped that thing on a rock going kind of fast and it bounced up and he hit himself in the head, puncturing his head with this thing. And then he slid all the way down and broke his leg, broke everything. And the neurological theory on what happened was that he was probably dead before he even finished going all the way down the mountain, essentially.
My mom yesterday just told me a crazy ass story. Her brother owns a boat in Florida, and they were boating through like a place that had low-hanging trees with a friend, and a friend got a stick from a tree through his head on the boat, like not through like a already available hole, like just like through his skull. And my uncle had to take him to the hospital, obviously, and he ended up staying with him for like several months because he had like rehabilitate, but he didn't die.
So he almost gave himself a lobotomy,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah, isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. I guess your skull's softer than you would think. Um, so, yes, 1999 is when they found this guy's body. And some people reach the conclusion that based on some of the evidence from his body, that he must have been the first one to summit Mount Everest. The reason was that he was found with no oxygen. He was not wearing his goggles. So it means he was coming down at night. And also
But
well, the reason he also didn't have oxygen because when you're coming down, you're trying to offload as much as possible so you can get down as quickly as possible. And so the oxygen tanks weigh a shitload, and that's why you want to get rid of them. But he also had carried a picture of his wife, Ruth, for the entire trip because his goal was when I get to the summit, I want to put the picture of my wife on the summit. And
hmm.
everybody knew this. They all talked about it. It was a known thing. He did not have the picture with him. So they're like,
So
he was
he
coming
so he
down.
must have already done it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't documented. So the other guy, Irvine, his body's never been found, and he's the one who actually had the cameras on him that would have showed
Hmm.
that they actually summited. And they haven't found his body yet, so they don't know. And so as of now, it's still Norgay and Hillary who summited first.
You gotta write shit down. Like if you're doing anything, you're about to die. Like write it in a note and put it in several parts of your body.
Yeah,
Like
well,
put it in your boot.
he was probably suffering from hypoxia.
Mm.
So he probably didn't know what was going on by the time he died. So let's get to climbing Everest today. So climbing Everest today kind of sounds more annoying than anything. There are no guides or tour companies that conduct these expeditions. Wait, there are no guides or tour companies? I don't know why I wrote that. There's a million guides and touring companies that do these expeditions, and the pricing is kind of all over the map. So the average I found was somewhere around $50,000 to pay to try to summit Everest. You're summiting is not guaranteed. Most people, a lot of people don't, but
Hmm.
um, I saw a range of somewhere in the $30,000 range. I saw one that was $200,000 to do this expedition. The $200,000 one sounded more like a luxury vacation than like a harrowing trek. That company is called Furtenbach Adventures. So if anybody wants to book a $200,000 expedition to Everest, then you can do it through the Furtenbach Adventures. They're not paid sponsors of this podcast,
Could you
just so
imagine?
we're clear.
Because we know that your listeners are the kind of folks who spend $200,000 um to climb Mount Everest. If you listen to this and you have done that, please let us know because we'd love to know how you found our podcast.
And can you write us a check?
Who are you?
So there's a way to do it cheaper on your own. So basically go without an expedition. I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't sign up for that option later on, which should be clear.
I feel like I know why. Yeah.
But in that situation, you can expect to pay somewhere around $20,000. Most of that seems to be like in fees that you pay to the Nepalese government. So $11,000 is just for the permit to be able to get to base camp and climb Everest. Anyways, all that to say that you are then also going to run an additional cost of $25,000 or so on food and gear so you can actually climb up to the mountain. Some places tack on additional $5,000 for a private cook. And apparently most places advise that you do this because like you spend so much time on the hiking that trying to make food is kind of impossible after you're done.
How does a cook do it then?
Well, that's all they do though. Because like
But
you're not
they
assembling
don't
and
hike.
no, they don't hike. They don't assemble and disassemble tents. Like I'm gonna explain like what the actual process is of
Okay.
getting up to creating tents. But, like it is arduous doing it. And so you have somebody who's dedicated to sitting inside a tent, chopping cauliflowers. I don't know what they do, but cooking something. So
Just chopping cauliflowers on Mount Everest, no big deal.
all day long. So all you do is just chop cauliflowers. So the trek itself includes walking for about 6 to 8 hours a day in negative 30-degree weather for about 2 weeks straight. So timing wise, you have to acclimate to reduced oxygen. So you can't just run up the mountain. Like you could do it a lot faster if you didn't have to acclimate, but you have to acclimate.
Right.
So you have to stop at these different checkpoints or what's called base camps to give your body time to adjust.
Are those
So
permanent?
so base camp, there's two base camps that are semi-permanent. So they're transitory. So people like if you look at pictures of base camp in Everest, it's not like one tent. It's like a refugee camp of people.
Yeah.
And they pack their stuff up and they go. And then other people show up. And so it's like a transitory thing. Like there's not like a permanent station there, but it's just like where base camp happens to be. It's about 17,000 feet up. Yeah, so that was the other part of this I wanted to mention was in addition to walking and climbing, you're also constantly assembling and disassembling a tent nearly every day that you're not using the time to acclimate to. The
Hate that.
complete journey takes about 6 weeks long. It starts in a Nepalese city called Lukla. When you land at this airport called the Tenzing Hilary Airport, which is absolutely terrifying. It's considered one of the most dangerous airports in the world. It is so Edmund Hillary is the one responsible for building this thing. It's carved into the side of the mountain at an elevation of nearly 10,000 feet. If you look at pictures of it, you'll see that if anything goes wrong during takeoff, all you do is go straight down for 2 miles until you like explode into the side of the mountain. Like it's terrifying. From that airport, you go to base camp. Like I said, base camp is going to be 17,000 feet. And from there, you spend about the next 4 weeks or so going up and down the mountain, putting down new camps, putting provisions and food and oxygen tanks there, and doing all that stuff further and
So
further
you
up the
go,
mountain.
will you go up and down? No, you're
Yeah.
just going up.
Yeah,
Wait.
you're going up. So you start at base camp, you go up, you stop at a certain elevation, you establish a new base camp, then you go up, establish another base camp, you go up, establish another base camp, and then you get to like kind of like the depth zone. And from what it sounds like, when you're in the depth zone, you kind of have to go all the way to the top, and then you have to get back down to under sub 26,000 feet. And that's usually where people end up dying. But yeah, it's like a 4 week long process of doing this. If you decide that you want to climb Everest, you're going to basically join a group of somewhere around 800 people who are also trying to summit the mountain every year. Those are the people trying to summit. Those are the craziest of the crazy people. There's about 500 people a day that show up at base camp just to hike. Basically, they're trying to go 17,000 feet. It's already arduous enough. They're going to go back down. So that's usually what you're looking at.
That seems fine.
Yeah. There are currently about 330 bodies on Everest, and they're going to stay there because trying to reclaim these bodies is another suicide mission. So we're going to get into some of the fun, gory stories that persist around it. So
It's
I'm going to
wild.
break this down into several things. One, I'm going to break down to like famous deaths on Everest. One, I'm going to break down to most deaths in a single day, and then the last is going to be like the particularly creepiest story I heard about what happened on Everest before. So some more famous deaths. There are three of them that I'm going to highlight. I'm going to do the previous one, the last. So Green Boots. This is
Right.
someone that everybody's heard of Green Boots. I'll try to paint a visual picture of this. It's a guy laying on his side. His legs are elevated, and it looks like his head and lower body or upper body are kind of like angled downward in this little crevasse area.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know who this is. We
Not
assume,
possible.
yeah, we assume that this guy is someone named, oh man, Sawang Peli Darj Door. It's totally nailed it. But we
Uh-huh.
don't know for sure. The reason we think it might be this guy is that we know that Sawang was in a 1996 disaster on Everest. That's when a blizzard rolled in and killed 8 people, and nobody's been able to positively identify this body.
How can that be? Have they not tried? Like, how can that be?
I don't know if they've tried or not. Yeah, we don't
Because
know.
how can you have a picture of this dead body as close as I'm seeing this picture of this dead body and not have like checked his
Rummage through
pockets?
his pockets. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I don't know. Well, describe the last story. Maybe that'll explain why people don't do this. Long story short is that the quote I heard is that trying to keep yourself alive on Everest at trying to summit is an extreme challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think about anything else going on around you is almost impossible because all you're focusing on
Yeah.
is trying to stay alive. So, but there have been some efforts there. So, for example, sorry, going back to who this guy is, the reason they assume it's this guy is because he was spotted late May. So the blizzard hit like May 9th.
Oh my
Late
God.
May was the first time somebody was trying to summit and they spotted this body there. And they're like, the only thing that's happened has been this blizzard. So it's got to be this guy. This is the
Yeah.
one the guy that's unaccounted for. There's other
Right.
theories that he's another person as well, but that was like disproven. So you look like you were to say something.
No, that was my question was like they must have a list of people he could be because people aren't accounted for. Right.
Right, right,
Yeah.
exactly. So in 2014, his body was basically just like kicked over and relocated to fall down the side. So they're like, because they're trying to keep these dead bodies out of view of climbers, and they just like rolled them away. They're like, just do the minimal effort possible, get this thing out of the way, and they did that. There's another person there named Sleeping Beauty. That's her nickname. Her real name is Frances Arsentiev. She died in May of 1998 while attempting to summit Everest with her husband. On their way down, the two somehow separated. I keep picturing just like crazy snowfall and like you just going blind from like snow hitting you from every angle while you're freezing, and that's probably how you end up getting separated. But she was separated from her husband. Her husband's name is Sergey, and Sergey made it to base camp. His wife Frances did not. Another team of climbers came across Frances, and they tried to carry her down before they were like, "This is too much. This is too difficult. We have to leave you." That's how it is. It's so do or die up there. It sounds like. Um,
Wow. It's she's just laying there in her coat.
yeah, Yeah, so
Wow.
they left her on the mountain, and witnesses say that her husband was ascending past them as they were going down to base camp, presumably to go find his wife.
Hmm.
She ended up staying alive for about another day before dying of exposure, frostbite, hypoxia, all of it. A year later, Sergei's body was discovered having died from a fall trying to climb to get to Francis. She was left there. So there's pictures of her. Have you seen this?
I'm looking at the picture of her in her purple coat just laying there.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. She was left laying on her side for about 9 years before,
Hmm.
again, another group of climbers just pushed her off the side because they were like, we need to stop. We don't want to look at this anymore, basically.
Wait, so the first climbers that tried to bring her down, was she still alive or no?
She was still alive. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. But they were like, it's too much. Like,
Yeah.
so, I mean, you're carrying oxygen tanks. Like, these,
No, I know, but that's just terrible.
yeah, yeah. So the creepiest one to me is don't look her up yet. I want to get
Okay.
your reaction when you look her up. Her name is the German woman. Well, her
Hmm.
nickname is the German woman. Her real name is Hannelore Schmatz. And this one's like the creepiest to me, mostly because of what she looks like. So scary. So she was a German woman. She down in Everest, obviously. She grew tired from the climb, and basically the Sherpas were telling her, "We can't stop. We have there's there's windows of time that you're supposed to make it between camps. Like it's all planned out so that you're not out in the open when the weather and the winds become the worst." And she was like, "I need to stop and rest." The Sherpa was like, "Please don't, please don't, please don't." She did it anyways. The Sherpa, to his credit, stayed with her long enough to where he actually suffered from frostbite and lost some fingers as a result of this. But her last words before the Sherpa left was just asking him for water. She said, "Water, water," and then she died. That was on October 2nd of 1979. She died sitting up, and her body froze basically in that posture on the southern route up the mountain. So pictures of her, she has this like a mummified face. It looks really scary.
Can I look up now?
And yeah, look her up now.
Oh, a lot of these are tell me I shouldn't look at it. View image. Oh God.
Isn't that creepy?
That is not oh my God. Her face looks like the most terrifying face I've ever seen in my whole entire fucking life.
So what they were saying was before her body decomposed and her flesh kind of turned whatever that is,
Oh my
um,
God.
they said that her eyes were wide open. So you'd be talking about it's so scary. It's so freaking scary. Dude, this is on like the main trail. Like this is not like she's not like hidden. Like she was on you're walking by these bodies as you're going up to the summit. It's like
This
crazy.
I'm literally right now having nightmares and I'm not even asleep.
But the
Jesus
way,
Christ.
we can describe the way she looks. So she's leaning against a backpack in that picture. And yeah, the last time they saw her, she was like wide open. Her eyes were wide open, and she was just like frozen in time, like right there. And then obviously you see what you see now, which is her face just fucking peeling off.
Oh
Um,
my God. Well, that was worse than I ever could have imagined.
Apparently her body is also not there anymore, but that wasn't because people moved her. I think that people were too scared to move her. I read so many reports of people coming up to her body and being like, "This has to be like a tent or something." Like, oh my god, that's a woman.
That is the scariest thing to see on a hike.
That is a scary. Yeah, you turn around if you see that on the hike, just turn around. But apparently the winds are pretty harsh there, and so her body ended up getting hit by some wind and just tumbling the other direction. So she's still on the mountain. She's still somewhere like that same body in that exact same posture, frozen exactly like that, is somewhere on that mountain.
Are there any
Not
animals
good.
there? No, right?
So there not at the elevation that she would be at, but they're
Hmm.
down lower down the mountain under base camp. There are like yaks and stuff like that. They found one species of black spider that was able to survive like above base camp, but that's it. Like that's all there is. Like
Oh,
I didn't know
jeez.
what that thing eats. So
Okay.
um on the deadliest expedition, this would be an avalanche that occurred in 2015. So this is pretty straightforward. It was April 25th, 2015. A 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit Nepal. It was fucking huge. And that triggered a massive avalanche on Everest. The avalanche essentially killed 24 people and injured 61 others. So, like, again,
Hmm.
most of those people, their bodies are still like, they're all there. Like, everybody's still there.
Yeah.
So, The creepiest story, in my opinion, was actually a guy named David Sharp. And you're probably going to recognize this one because this happened fairly recently in May of 2006, and it got like a ton of media attention. So this was a Brit trying to summit Everest, and he tried doing so before. He tried in 2003 and failed to summit in that endeavor. He eventually suffered some frostbite that led to him losing some toes in 2003. He
Hmm.
tried again in 2004, but for reasons that like feel like stupid to me, he was really anti using supplementary oxygen. His take on it was if you use supplementary oxygen, then it's just a hike. But it's not a challenge if you don't. But it's like, but
You're an asshole.
your brain
Yeah.
doesn't know that. Like, your organs don't know that. Your organs just know that they're not getting oxygen. So he tried again. So in 2006, he decided to do it unguided. So he went without a Sherpa, without a guide, without an expedition party that he was joining. And on that attempt, he got to about 28,000 feet, which is exactly where Green Boots is. And he sat down in that crevasse next to him and just like was shaking, and just like sitting there, like unable to continue on.
Oh
It
my
is
gosh.
assumed that due to the lack of oxygen, because of the lack of having the supplemental tanks with him, it's assumed that he suffered from altitude sickness, which can result in swelling of the brain, fluid building up in the lungs, confusion, like a general hangover feeling. And add to that the fact that it was also the coldest night of the season that night. And others around him mostly assumed that he wasn't going to make it. So about 30 to 40 people walked right by David as he was like dying on this hill next to, or this crevasse next to Green Boots, and they didn't help. Nobody helped him. Um, the media in general was pretty hard on them, but like I said, one climber said that uh, that at 8,000 meters high, it's incredibly hard to keep yourself alive, much less keep somebody else alive, and so nobody did
Right. And it's like
anything.
it sucks because like it's not their responsibility that he's an idiot.
Yeah, yeah, and one thing I read. Well, two things. One is Edmund Hillary himself was incredibly critical of the hiking community, saying summiting isn't as important as saving someone's life, which I would agree with.
Hmm.
Um, but then his
But
own
also they're putting
mom,
themselves at risk.
yeah, they putting themselves at risk, and his own mom was like, "I don't blame them for not helping him."
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but it's also worth noting that the general theory now is that he probably would have died anyways. So what probably would have happened is the lack of oxygen would have already damaged his organs and his brain. What probably would have happened if they gave him oxygen was A, they would have risked their own lives, and B, he probably would have just gotten to base camp and died anyways. That's probably what would have happened.
Because he was like
So
so hurt.
yeah, exactly. So that's prevailing through as far as that guy's concerned. But yeah, people are still climbing, people are still going up to Everest. Apparently, it's not even considered the most intense hike out there out of the large what's called the 8Kers, which is the 8,000 meter and up um, mountains. K2 is presumably more difficult and more challenging as a mountain climber to actually get up on top of,
Hmm.
but yeah, people are still doing it. People are still dying on it, and I assume they're going to keep doing it. It does feel so much less scary to me than trying to go down to like the Mariana Trench or the Titanic or something
Yeah. I mean, like, did you watch The Deepest Breath?
new.
It's like a documentary about people who do like the like deep diving without air, and they dive so deep that scuba divers can't save them because scuba divers have to like go up slowly. And they do like one deep breath and they dive all the way down, and then they like prove that they didn't go up, and people die all the time, and it's terrible.
Also,
Um,
a sport I don't need to be a part of.
yeah, no, I definitely remember that. I was also so I know people who didn't die. So I feel like I told you this before. This is so stupid, but I when I was painting my guest bathroom, I watched two Mount Everest movies. Whenever I'm in there, I think about Mount Everest. But I watched like the dramatization and the documentary. Do you remember that guy in the 90s who had to grow a nose on his forehead?
Yeah, yeah.
That guy, I feel like I remember when he was on the cover of People with like his black nose that was like rotting off from frostbite, and they grew him a nose on his forehead and twisted it down.
I remember that. Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
remember?
you're right. It was they cut it here and they
Yeah,
twisted it all. Oh, yeah, wow.
yeah. And that was like a thing. Yeah, man, it's very dangerous. And it's such a weird rich person's sport, right? Does anyone who are these people? Do you have any
So a
idea who they
lot of
are?
them, yeah. So there's a lot of people who fall in the category of like physicians and lawyers and business people. There's a lot of engineers that get into stuff like
Mm-hmm.
this. There's the 2015 avalanche killed like a pretty well-known engineer. He was a executive at Google in charge of like their X program. I don't even know if that's still around, but so it's that caliber of person, right? It's like you have to be rich to get into this. It's like there's no poor people into polo or like yachting, right? Like,
Yeah. But I
but
guess it's like, I mean, how much money does Nepal make from it? Is it
yeah, yeah. I mean, look, the
good or
Sherpas, like, yeah, like the
yeah.
Sherpas, like, I mean, it is a huge industry there, and so it's probably like a net positive overall for them, despite the fact that they have to look at dead bodies constantly. But
Are they like it's something about are they all the same? Are the Sherpas all like from the same group of people? Like are they able to handle the high altitude better than everyone else? You know? Like people
yeah,
not from
yeah,
that area, like they're from there, so they're like used to it. So that helps them,
yes.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So part of reading about David's situation was they mentioned how what he was trying to do would have been a challenge for even a Sherpa.
Mm,
So they rank it that way. It's like a Sherpa just like is easy breezy. My life is on this mountain, whatever. But yeah, so they're much more acclimated to it.
yeah.
I mean,
A
their
wild
airport
job.
starts at 10,000 feet.
Oh, what's the name of the airport again? I'm gonna Google it.
Tenzing Hillary Airport. Yeah, like at first I was like, when I started like thinking about this, I was like, God, these people are idiots, and like Hillary's probably terrible and all that. And then the more I researched, I was like, okay, like
Yeah.
I mean, it is like legitimately risking your life. Questionable why you would. I wouldn't for this, but to your point, don't yuck someone's yums, I guess.
Yeah, I mean if they're not hurting anyone but themselves, you know, it's cool if they do it. And but I just the leaving the dead bodies there is really hard to like I don't know, wrap your head around.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
how like none of my hobbies involve walking past the people who tried to do it before and died.
yeah.
Like that just is a lot. And it's when you see that you're like, what is wrong with you? But also like, who cares? Yeah. If they want to
I
do it
mean,
and
it's the same thing. I mean, like bringing up the Titanic situation. Like, yeah, you're literally
yeah.
just going down to see a grave where the body just happened to have been consumed by the elements. But like, that's what you're doing. You're like,
Hmm.
so
I watched this like when I was watching all those disaster movies and I was thinking about Yellowstone exploding, there was one where the I can't remember which one it was, but where like the people were on these like big arcs that they had like to go to like try to stay alive. Like the rich people were on them because they knew the world was ending, and the world was ending and it was shifting so quickly that they were like on a boat and the boat was going to hit Mount Everest, and it was just like really dumb. But they were like, how could there be a mountain this high? And they're like, it's Mount Everest, and it was like a big flood and like a thing.
that was 2012.
Was it 2012?
Yeah,
Yes. Okay. Okay. Um.
that
Yeah.
was so stupid.
Like, oh, the
Because
earth
it's
has
like
shifted. Oh, because then there was like that Russian and then like his like
his
girlfriend and then she
girlfriend.
had
Yeah,
was yeah, and then like the people who you're supposed to think are the main characters of that movie like do something that makes a bunch of people die. Remember that part? And then it's okay.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
But
Well, cool.
then where does
Yeah.
where does the water come from? Like, how do you get enough water to fill Mount Everest? Like, it doesn't makes no sense. Like,
We have a lot of very serious questions about the truth behind the movie 2012. It's good though.
that's so funny. That's so funny. Yeah. Sweet. That's my story. Hope people liked it. I'm looking for some fun, cool ideas. Um, so anybody has a cool idea for me, I will take cool ideas.
Yeah. What kind of ideas do you want?
More murder stuff, but I'm like kind of getting gassed out on murder because it's just like there's
Hmm.
only so many crazy people in the world and so many ways you can say, and then he cut her head off.
Fair.
So
I feel like there's one that someone sent to us on Instagram. Let me make sure I send it to you in our messages. That would be a fun one. But I'll let you know.
sweet.
Cool.
Um, Well, write to us, please, doomtofillpod@gmail.com. Give us your ideas, your suggestions, anything you're thinking about or want us to be thinking about. And by the time you hear this, Taylor will be on her way to see the incredible Dan Carlin.
Oh my goodness. I am just wildly excited. So, um, I will keep everyone posted. And if you're coming, I can't wait to see you.
Love it.